what comes after finishing the thing that you were born to do? And that's really how I felt about Feeding Ghosts, and why I have been clear from the jump that I was only ever making one book, is I truly do believe that the reason I was born as an artist and a writer, and it was clear that I could never be anything else, was because someone in my family had to finish this story. And I needed to have those skill sets and aptitudes to be able to do it.
Well, congratulations on the Pulitzer. That's huge. There's this wild story that you found out about winning the Pulitzer when you were actually working as a cook in Juneau in Alaska, which is something that you do most summers. Can you take me back to that moment where you found out that you were a Pulitzer winner?
So I had taken this really bizarre cooking job where I was actually working as the sous chef for a private lounge in the state legislature. So I was feeding all of the senators and representatives in a room that only they were allowed in. And I was at work making sandwiches, and my phone just started buzzing like mad. And the internet there wasn't great. And so I couldn't really tell what was going on. And I glanced at it. And based on that, I thought that I was nominated, which was mind blowing enough. But then one of the representatives was in the lounge sitting at a table, and he kind of was on his phone looking more deeply. And he walked over to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "No, dude, you're not nominated. You won." And then session broke and all of the elected officials came in, and I had to serve them lunch. And I still don't know if my brain has fully integrated what's happened.
That's wild. I want to circle like way back to actually, though, one of the first things you said, which is you mentioned like in some ways hating the process of writing the book, but then loving the process of actually going out and talking about it. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Because I feel like that's an interesting dichotomy for the making of something to be painful, but then the process of speaking about it with people to be enjoyable.
Absolutely. So for me, the thesis of the book, which at the beginning, I don't know that I would have been able to give words to it or recognize what I was doing, was that isolation had broken my family such that they were stuck within trauma loops because there was no other world for them to belong to. And that was what I ran away from in my family. I've always been somebody who loves to be connected, who loves to understand how the fabric of human cultures and societies fit together. And so for me, the process of making a book was basically having to face the thing that I'm the most afraid of, which was entering the same place that my mother and grandma were trapped in, which was living inside one story that became the entirety of my horizons. And I spoke really candidly during the process that it really devastated my mental health. And it is something that I think I'm still licking my wounds from a little bit. And when the book came out, I made a list of everybody I loved. And because I've lived this really geographically non-traditional life, I have people all over North America. And I said, okay, well, book tour, I'm just going to go hug everybody. And lived out of my car, off a bicycle, on friends' couches for 8 months with Seattle as my kind of return to base. And for me, it wasn't about the book. It was having done the work I needed to do and therefore being able to reconnect with the world in a way that I had really been yearning for.
Mm. Yeah, there's this idea that you also talk about specifically hungry ghosts in Chinese culture, like the idea of a person who didn't accomplish something that they needed to accomplish on Earth. And they're like roaming the planet with this appetite that's so insatiable. Was that a concept that you felt resonating for you, that like your family ghosts were specifically very hungry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the trauma of my matrilineal lineage was way more literal than it was in most families, because I grew up with my grandmother and all she did all day, every day, literally, this is nothing about this is metaphoric, is she sat at her writing desk and she rewrote the story of her past over and over and over again. And I think seeing that and seeing how she had been consumed by a story that she could never leave, it was very clear what my job was on this one. My grandmother and I were polar opposites, and that what she really wanted above all else was She wanted to be famous. She wanted to be a glamorous, famous writer. And it's funny because, she weighs, she's a tiny, tiny woman. I'm like giant compared to her. You see family pictures of us and it's just comical. But one of the few items of hers that remained and was passed down is she had this white rabbit fur coat that must have fit her like it was an Edward Gorey cape. And I just remember thinking like, yes, this is the garment of who my grandmother wanted to be. She wanted to be in that spotlight and in that really elite echelon of society. And 2 generations later, I want the exact opposite, where, all I want is to hide in the woods. And I think that's a really interesting counterpoint, where through reading my grandmother's memoir, I saw what she wanted to be. And it was something that I had a little bit of trouble fully respecting, and is probably part of why I've gone to a maybe overly rigid extreme in trying to avoid the spotlight in my own career.
Mm. This is maybe a straight. What do you think that younger version of your grandmother would make of the fact that you are now like a successful writer and just don't want this sort of social cachet that was for her kind of the whole point of the whole thing?
Oh, I mean, she would be my +1 to all the award ceremonies. She would be like, heck yeah, I get to dress up, smooth. She would love it. And that's kind of where in some ways I feel like, all right, I'll do what my family needs for this last round, and I'll take a victory lap for my grandma's desire for fame and attention, because this is her dream. This is what she wanted. But what I really have been feeling in kind of that deeper emotional resonance level of this is, so my mother, I'm really fortunate in that I had this unicorn, and that I had an immigrant mother who wanted to talk about the past, and also somebody who is incredibly, incredibly powerful with her words in her own right. And so she told me that she always thought of my grandmother as a drowning woman trying to throw her on the shore so that she wouldn't drown with her. And that line of my mother's has really been sticking with me, because the feeling in my body upon winning the Pulitzer is, oh my God, Sun Yi did it. She got my mother safe, and she got me safe. And there is a feeling of freedom that feels like it has reached back through time and allowed all 3 of us to put down a fear that has defined us.